Right, welcome everyone to NAB's last day here at the Maxon booth, showcasing how our artists use Maxon 1 and ZBrush, all the things that are included within it, within their workflow to make some of the most amazing art that we've been seeing throughout the show. Now the good news is, I'm accompanied by our resident AI and metahuman, Elly Wade, and she's going to be showcasing a little bit more. So Elly, take it from here.
Thanks, Matthias. Hey everyone, how's it going? So my name's Elly, and I'm part of the Maxon Training Team. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here. Day 4. It's been a lot of fun. So I'm going to be diving into the similar kind of stuff that we did on Monday's session, like rope dynamics, and bringing that into Redshift and looking at color user data. But I'm going to try and include some little extra bits that we didn't quite get to. It's going to be a little bit shorter than Monday's session because I know EJ's coming up next, so I'm going to keep it under half an hour. So let's start off by creating some fun dynamics. What I'm going to do, I've downloaded this like soup or cereal bowl asset from the asset browser, and we're going to make some like noodles come in here. So what we want to do, I'm just going to pull it out of its subdivision surface for now. I'm not too worried about that. I'm just going to keep it low poly. And I'm going to grab myself a spline, and I'm just going to rename this just so I know what I'm doing. Cool, right, so we've got that going on. And I'm just going to set up my dynamics, and if anyone's new to Cinema 4D, the way that we do that is we use Cinema 4D's tags. And so I'm just going to right-click my spline, because I want my spline to be considered as a piece of rope. And so we're going to grab our rope tag. And if we take that, we're not too worried about these settings just yet. We're going to set up our collider, and then we'll deal with all that other stuff. So let me just come into my spline, and I'm going to change it to 2 sides. And this is the best way to create a straight line spline. And let me set my radius maybe to something like, I don't know, maybe like 70 centimeters. And we're going to rotate it. So we want it to fall down into our bowl here. I'm just going to pull it up. And let me go into my spline, and again, I'm just going to change the color of this. We can do this inside of our preferences as well, and have it be like yellow or red instead of like this gray color. But I'm just going to change it in here to yellow so you guys can see it nice and clearly on the session. Just come a little bit closer. Okay, so we have our spline, and we have our soup bowl. And I'm going to make our soup bowl a collider, because the trouble is when we use dynamics, if I make my rope spline dynamic, but not my bowl, if I don't set my collisions, it's going to like pass straight through it. Whereas we need it to be seen as a dynamic object. Okay, cool. So we've set our stuff up. But what I need to do, I need to come back into my spline, and I need to change my points from adaptive to subdivided. Because if I just play this now, you'll see what happens. It sort of goes straight down, and it doesn't coil together like we want it to. So if I just change this to, we have 2 options. We could do subdivided, but I like to use uniform because then it opens up the ability for me to enter the number of points that are going to be subdividing this spline. So let's go to something like 80. And now if we play this through, it's going to gather inside of our bowl in here. Oh, this mouse. There we go. Cool, so we can see that now. So it comes down. So now we've got the start of our sim going on. This is where we can start to adjust our settings inside of our rope tag. And I said this on Monday that I love the terminology and the naming that's used for these properties. So we have like bendiness, stretchiness, and bounciness. And they're really artist and user-friendly. Like it's really great for me. I'm not very technical, and so it works perfect for me. So bendiness, what it's going to do is, so the way that our new simulation system works in S26 is it's going to divide our objects and see them as particles. And so that's what we're gonna be doing, is it's seeing our spline as particles, which is why we're getting better performance, and we're going to get better collision options and less intersections and errors like we did in the previous system. And so what bendiness is going to do, it's going to allow an amount of bend between each of these particles. And so if I change this to a value of 0.1, it's going to try and keep its like stiffness and its structure. So if I just play this through, so we can see how it's trying to kind of like keep its like straight shape. I mean, the bowl's keeping it in anyway, but if this was on a plane, it would kind of sort of like pull back out. But what I want it to kind of like coil together like little bits of like noodles or spaghetti or whatever we want to be doing. So I'm going to enter a higher value, and this is going to allow more bend between each of our points and each of our particles, and it should start to coil together. So let's just play this through. Cool. So we have that going on. Stretchiness is the amount of stretch that's going to happen between each of our particles. I'm not too worried about that. And then bounciness is, if we want to create some bounce. Friction is going to work well for me, because at the moment we've got a little bit of like slipping and sliding going on. If I just sort of play this through, you might be able to see it if I come a little bit closer. We can see we have some jittering, we have some sliding around, which we can fix in the sim settings, but we can also add a bit of friction in here to fix that. So let me just do like a value of 5. I find with a lot of this stuff, it's just fun, just like mess around with these settings and see exactly what they do. I like to enter like low values of like a 0.1 and then like high values of like 50 or 100, and it really gives you an idea of how these settings make a difference to your simulation, and that's a lot of how I learn, really. Cool. Right, so radius-wise, if I can sort of come in here, this is going to be really important when we start to mess with our geometry. Hopefully you guys can see that our spline isn't actually touching the bowl or itself, and that's because we've told Cinema 4D that each of our particles, each of our points, has a radius of 0.5, and this is great. So when we turn this into geometry, we can match this radius value with the size of our geometry. So let me just sort of come back out a little bit so we can see that clearer. OK, so from here, I'm going to want to come to my project settings. So if you hit Control-D, or Command-D, depending on what machine you're on, it opens up your simulation settings inside of here. And this is where we can control a bunch of things. So what's really cool now about S36 is we can run our sim on the CPU or the GPU. So whatever kind of machine you can have something running on the GPU, and now your sim on the CPU. Then we can control our gravity. So we can have, if we just sort of, maybe enter a value of like something like 150. And I'm going to increase my number of frames, just so we have a bit more time to play with. And I'm going to play this through. And now what's happening is, because we have a lower gravity, everything's kind of falling a little bit slower. And I think that's quite nice. I quite like that. So everything's not kind of like really crazy fast. So our sub-steps works really well if we have any intersections or errors, which at the moment we actually don't, I don't think. Let's just check the bottom of here, just to make sure. No, so that looks cool. So let me get a bit better in here. I'm getting used to this mouse. It's the trouble with new systems. You've got to get used to it. Right, OK, here we go. Let me just rotate that round. Cool, right, a little bit better view. So if we did have intersections or we did have errors going on, we have so many different options inside of here, which we actually went through on Monday session. So feel free to go back and check that out and see what this stuff does, because we had some intersections going on when we reduced our radius, and so we can increase dampening, collision passes, and stuff like that. I'm going to actually do a couple of settings in here just to prevent some of the jittering and the moving that's going on. So it's not too bad. The gravity's done a good job, but hopefully you guys can see there's a lot of movement still occurring. And so we can, smoothing iterations is going to smooth out our sim overall, which is really great. And then dampening applies a certain amount of dampening to each of our points and our particles. So if I play this through now, everything's a little bit slower, it's a little bit smoother, and I think it looks quite nice. Cool. So now what we want to do is we want to turn this into some geometry. So the way that we do that is we can grab ourselves a sweep, and this is a generator inside of Cinema 4D, and we can generate some geometry. We have a bunch of different ones if we have a look in here, and I recommend going and having a little play if you've not ever messed with it before. And so what we can do, we can drop our spline, so this is like our noodle spline, into our sweep. And nothing's happened because we need to define our second spline, which is going to be the shape that our noodle is going to make up. And so circle is going to work really well for that, because we just want a nice sort of circle noodly shape. So I'm going to drop my circle into here, and it's going to be what's going on? It's crazy. And that's because our radius is set to 200 centimeters, so I didn't change that. So what I'm going to do in here, I'm going to set it to 0.5. And the reason I've set it to 0.5 is because that is the radius value inside of our rope tag settings. So if I set this to something different, so if I set it to 0.2 and leave my geometry radius to 0.5, what you'll notice is we're getting some intersections going on. So it's looking like our geometry is intersecting. And that's because we need to make sure we match these two radius values. So what I'm going to do, come back to my circle spline, and I'm going to change this to 0.2. That's a little bit too small. Let's go like 0.3, and then go to 0.3 on here as well. And let's just play this through and see how it's going. So what's great about the new sim stuff in 26 is the performance is super fast. So even though we've turned this from a spline into geometry, and we've got a certain number of points going on, it's still really, really fast. The reason it looks a little bit slower is because we reduced our gravity. It's not because of the performance. And we can make this nicer by dropping it inside of a subdivision surface. And what this is going to do, it's going to subdivide all of our polygons, and so we have a nice noodle shape. Cool, so let me just come back here. So what if we wanted to have like a whole bunch of these falling into here? So, what we could do, we could just copy and paste them. So I'm just hitting the control key, and I'm clicking and dragging. And then now we have a few more. So you can pull these out, and we can do a couple more like this. And I'm actually going to switch off my subdivision just to make it faster. So if I play this through now, oh, OK, cool, that's actually not too bad. That's not bad. But if you find that it's a little bit slow, a little trick is if you come to the 3 lines up here, this is a filter menu inside the object manager. And if you single click it, and go to the objects and double click subdivision surface, what it's going to do, it's going to select all of them to save me having to click through each one or change it. And I can adjust my settings in here, and it's going to adjust all the settings of all of them. And so if you find that your sim's a little bit slow or laggy and you're using subdivision, just turn that off while you're working. And now we can see this cool stuff. So this is cool, but what if I wanted to use MoGraph with this and then use that data inside of Redshift to texture these differently instead of having to create a different material for each and every one, which is what I did on my original project. So what we can do, we actually need to do a couple of different steps. So let me just delete this stuff. We don't want those guys. We're going to want this one. And so I know what we're all thinking, the same thing that I was thinking. I can grab a cloner, drop my subdivision into it, and then we can just reduce these values. And now we have a whole bunch of clones. So if I sort of come out of here, we can see we have a whole bunch of clones here. So now, actually, we might need to make them a little bit closer together so they fall into the bowl. And then set that to 3. OK, let me press play. And nothing happens. OK, why does nothing happen? So what we need to do, because we're doing spline dynamics, we need to clone our splines first before we turn them into geometry. It's called an order of operation. And so it's not able, what the cloner is doing is cloning the geometry, but it's not cloning the spline dynamics, so we're not getting that simulation. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to pull out our spline, delete all this other stuff, we're going to redo that, and then we drop our spline into our cloner. And so now our cloner is cloning our splines, which have our dynamics on, have our simulation on. So I'm just going to rotate these. I'm going to set up the same kind of thing that I did before. And pull them up. OK, so again, when I press play, nothing's going to happen. And this is because all we need to do is we need to make sure our rope or our dynamics tag is on our cloner, not our spline. So our cloner is creating all these splines, and so if you put it on the cloner, they're all going to become dynamic. So as soon as I play this through, they're all going to drop in, and we've got some crazy, spaghetti, noodly things going on. And now from here, now we have our clone simulation. We can then turn this into geometry in the same way that we did before. So if I grab myself my generator again, my sweep, drop my cloner into my sweep, grab myself a circle spline, and again, what size do we make them? 0.3? Cool. So I'm going to change my radius to 0.3. And then we drop our circle into the middle. And we're only getting one spaghetti noodle. And this can sometimes happen when we're working with with the cloner or with MoGraph inside of generators, we need to use a wonderful thing called a connect to connect all our clone splines together before we turn them into geometry. So at the moment, it's only seeing one of them, as we can see. So if I drop my connect here, and then put my cloner in my connect, we get exactly what we were hoping for. Let's play this through. Cool. So what I'm actually going to do, I might reduce my count a little bit, maybe. Yeah, let's go for that. Cool. And then from here, what we can do, we can subdivide to get that nice smooth geometry, just like we did before. OK, so now we've got to this part. We need to turn this into MoGraph geometry. So even though we're using the cloner, it's cloning splines. It's not cloning geometry. And when we use color user data in Redshift and we use MoGraph data, we need it to be MoGraph geometry in order to take that data and kind of texture our stuff. So the way that we can turn things really easily into MoGraph geometry is by grabbing ourselves something called a fracture. And all we need to do is drop our subdivision surface into our fracture, set our fracture to explode segments and connect, and then now we have MoGraph geometry. And everything's the same, so it doesn't make a difference to our simulation, but it's going to make a difference to, so it makes it a little bit slower. So what I can do, I'm going to turn off my subdivision surface for now. Let's just turn this down, just so, but the performance is a little bit better for the stream. So yeah, it doesn't make a difference to our sim, but now we can take our index ratio, our MoGraph data, and we can drive a shader inside of Redshift. And that's what I'm going to show you how to do now. So for anyone who's new to Cinema or new to 26 and is used to using Redshift or would like to use Redshift, you're probably kind of looking here and being like, OK, where is Redshift? Because so basically in 25, just to let everyone know, it used to come up in our toolbar here. But that's gone. And that's because it's been more integrated inside of C4D. So what we need to do is we come into our render settings, which is this button just here. And we change our renderer, which by default is set to standard. And we just need to make sure we select Redshift. And so now what you'll notice is we now have Redshift up in our toolbar. We have Redshift here, which is how we start our IPR. And then we have dynamic palettes. And so normally we have our environments and our lights in here. But now if you click them, these have all been updated, or they've converted to the Redshift equivalent, because Cinema 4D knows we're now working with Redshift. So if I just grab myself a dome light, it's a really nice, quick, easy way to light a scene. And you can drop in a HDR image there if you want to. And let's open up our Redshift render view. So this is how we're going to see all of the lovely stuff we do inside of Redshift. And if I just kick this off, we can see it's not looking very special at the moment, but we'll start to add some textures and make it look a little bit nicer. Let's get a bit closer in here. And maybe drop in like a plane. OK. So let's just subdivide our soup bowl now as well, so everything looks a little bit nicer. OK, cool. So how do we set up color user data? And how do we use that to drive a change in shaders and textures in Redshift? So this button here is going to open our material manager or material editor. And this is where we can create some materials. I'm just going to delete that. And so if I double click, it's going to open up a Redshift material. And this is because C4D knows that I'm working with Redshift. So it's optimized now. And if I double click that, it's going to open a material editor. And I'm going to work inside the node editor. So this is going to be Cinema 4D's node editor. If I just click that, it opens up our node editor. And so nodes can be a little bit scary, especially if it's not something you're used to, but don't be afraid of them. They're very powerful. We can do some amazing things with them, and it just opens up so many more possibilities that we wouldn't have originally. OK, so let me just kick off my render view so we can see what's going on. And I'm going to drop my material on my fracture. That's important, because our fracture is what's defining our MoGraph geometry. OK, So in here, we have like our Redshift material node, and we have our output node, and this is what's driving. We've got like a glossy gray texture going on in here. And I can come to my Redshift material, and we can change our colors and make it look nice like this. But I want to use color user data. I want to use the MoGraph stuff. That's the reason we turn it into MoGraph geometry, so we can access that information. So let me just get rid of that. Cool. Right, so if I'm in my node editor, Cinema 4D's node editor, and hit the C key, it's going to open up a shortcut to my nodes. And all I need to do is type in the name of the node that I would like. And in Redshift, we have our color user data. And in here, we can drop a attribute, or we can use some of the presets. And our presets, we have MoGraph color and index ratio. So index ratio, if I come in, if I just sort of, where's my sim gone? Let me just play it through. Let's just play that through a little bit. OK. So index ratio, if I come into my fracture and display the index ratio, what you should notice is, can I see that? I can't see that. So normally you should be able to see like the individual. It's basically what it's going to do. It's going to assign a number to each of our individual pieces of geometry, or each of our individual spaghetti noodle things. And so with that information, we can grab our index ratio, and we can plug that into our color input of our Redshift material here. Let me drop that on my fracture. There we go. There we go. That's what we're hoping for. So now we're getting some change in colors. What we can do is we can come into geometry ID color. And so what this is going to do, it's going to assign a different color to each individual piece of geometry based on its ID. And so we can get some really cool colors here inside there. And this is nice. And then we can retexture these. So if you have a certain palette, if I grab a ramp, the ramp is going to colorize this color user data. So we can come in and we can drop in a color palette. And this is nice. This is a cool way of working, especially if it's something that we're new to doing. It's nice to see all these fun colors with only a couple of nodes. But the trouble is, everything is being controlled and defined by one material. So we have one set of base properties. So if I wanted to have like a shiny metal material and then a cool fabric string material, I can't do that with this setup. But we can slightly change this setup, use the same kind of color user data, and use that to drive a change of shaders. Then we can set up each of those individual different materials. OK, I'm running out of time very quickly. OK, cool. So how do we do this? Let's jump in. So I'm going to hit the C key again, and I need to grab myself a shader switch. And a shader switch is a great way of defining different materials. So if we have a look down here, we have a whole bunch of shader inputs. And a shader input is basically just a material. So if I grab a material node, make it any old color, plug that into my shader switch to shader 0. And then I'm going to plug that into my output so we can see what's going on. OK, so we have that. And now let's just define like a second material just so we can see how the shader switch works. And we'll get a teal material and plug that into my shader 1. Then inside the shader switch, we have a shader selector. So we can control like between 0 and 1. Let's do like a third material just so it looks a little bit more interesting. Grab a third material. And maybe make it something like yellow. And plug that in, and that will just be my shader 2. OK, so back in my shader switch, I can now choose between my shader selector numbers, and it's going to update inside of my render view to show my different colors. But that's not great, because I don't really want to manually be changing my shader selector. So how can we take the color user data information, turn it into numerical data, and have it drive our shaders? Well, we can do that. We can combine all of this stuff together. If I just get rid of these two, we don't need those. I'm going to take my color user data. So this is what this is doing. And then I'm going to grab something called a change range. And what change range is going to do, it's going to take the color information from the color user data, turn it into numerical data, so 0, 1, 2, etc. And then that can then drive which shader is going to be shown on which individual piece of spaghetti. So let's just connect all this stuff together. So color user data into change range into shader switch selector. Cool. So now we can see 2 of our colors, but we'd set up 3. So we'd set up 3 different materials. And so all we need to do, we need to come into our change range. At the moment, we have a range min and maximum, and so we have 0 and 1. So what's happening is we have our numerical 0 and 1, and that's showing our 2 shaders, because we only have our 2 number values. Because we have 3 shaders, we need to increase our range max to 2. If we had 4 shaders, we'd increase it to 3, etc. And then we should be able to see our different colors, which we can't. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come into my presets, and I'm going to change it back to index ratio. And hopefully this should then show my 3 different colors. There we go. So if I just solo this, you guys can see how these colors are driving the different materials now. And the reason I like this setup, as opposed to the previous one where we just had the one material, is now I have an individual material set up for each texture or each noodle. So now I can define one can be a metal material. So let's do that, and it can have its own roughness. So let's say this pink one we want to create as like a metal material. So if we come into our material node, we actually have a bunch of presets that we can use. So if I just make like a gold preset, this is going to update to be gold. And I can control my roughness individually now of this node. And it's not going to be overall. So we have a bunch of different base properties that we can control now. And then let's just make let's really quickly just make something. Let me grab a material blender. And a material blender is really cool. So we can blend between 2 different materials and use a black and white texture map or a mask to mask between those different colors or materials. So let me just duplicate this material node here. And this is going to be our second color. So I'm going to plug that into my material color 1. And let's just make it like black. And we'll do a little like bumblebee vibes going on. Cool, now we need to create a mask. And the easiest way to create a black and white mask inside of Cinema is to grab a Maxon noise. If I solo this, we can see what it looks like. And I love this one here. I think it looks really cool. It's SEMA. And if I just drop down to the overall scale, make it a bit smaller, we're going to have a bunch more of these like crazy little lines. So now what we can do, we can take this black and white mask, and we can use it to blend between our 2 colors that we just set up here, or our 2 materials. So we come in, and we go to blend color, and it's going to update in a sec. And now we have this crazy little texture going on here. So yeah. So quickly, just to recap, because I'm aware that I am hitting my 30-minute mark. We created some simulations by using the new rope dynamics inside of Cinema 4D 26. Cloned it, turned it into geometry, which is the order that we needed to do because we were cloning them. And then we dropped it into a fracture to turn it into MoGraph geometry. And then because we have MoGraph geometry, we can take the MoGraph data information inside of our color user data node, turn it into numerical values, which then drives our different shaders across our cloned MoGraph simulation. So thanks a lot, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that. So yeah, this was a little bit of like a speedier version of what I did on Monday. So feel free to go and check that one out. And we dive into this in a little bit more detail when I had a bit more time. And whilst I wait for Matthias, I'm just going to ad-lib for a bit. I'll show you the simulation and the full animation of what I actually created. So this I made specifically for NAB to show this new stuff in 26. Spaghetti noodles. So fun to play with and super easy to set up. Cool, thanks everyone.
I'd say give a big round, but they already did. So awesome. Let me see. I think we might have some questions from the audience, but if you have any questions live takes precedent over online. So if you have questions, just raise your hand, call it out. But I know Elly does an excellent job, so you probably don't have any questions. Look at that. Excellent. On day 3?
Day 3? Day 4.
Oh,
Damn, day 4. Final
day 4.
day.
So many days.
So many days. Good fun day. Good fun days, though.
It is good fun
Good fun days.
So we're going to be up next with our next presenter, EJ, here in just a moment. So stay tuned. We'll be right back right after this break. If you do have questions for Elly, she'll be in the back here for the next hour. Thanks so much. We'll see you after this.